Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Judy the YouTube Lawyer with Livestream Lawyer Show. Thank you all for being here today. I'd just like to point out that I am wearing these bubble tea earrings again from MissModi.com. So I'm going to put that up there just because I really love these products made by a woman that lives in Los Angeles. And these are just so cute. She actually gave me a free pair of earrings that are slightly different. They're called like Taiwanese street food earrings. So I'm not wearing those today, obviously, but they are really cute steamed dumplings. And I just think her products are amazing. So please check it out. If you're the type that wears earrings or you need to buy a gift for somebody, it's missmodi.com. So Happy New Year to everybody out there in YouTube land. Really appreciate all the support that people have given me. And this episode's topic is going to be a little bit more serious, but I'd be glad to answer any other questions. We'll open it up to a live Q&A after we discuss the main topic of today's episode, which is racism in the legal profession. So also, I did want to touch on, because there have been a handful of people who have told me, hey, wouldn't it be funny if you did a reaction video to Better Call Saul, or how do you feel about that TV show or the Netflix show? But the truth is that I don't really care to watch Better Call Saul. And from what little I have seen on the internet, I've read up a little bit about the show and stuff. I mean, it really holds no interest to me because it's fictionalized. And I am really living the life of a lawyer, of a sort of small town, suburban lawyer, solo practitioner. There were plenty of times when I was just scraping by and trying to hustle and get work and stuff. So I don't really want to watch some Hollywoodized version of some other attorney. It does seem to be kind of really a slow moving show. So I'll just show a little bit about that to add some spice to it. So, yeah, I saw some YouTube videos, and there's a clip about the best or unforgettable moments on YouTube about Better Call Saul. And I'm like, this is supposed to be really enticing or something. So it's not really that enticing to me, but some people really have gotten into the show and think that it's very compelling. So, yeah, I mean, there's some side story here where he has a client, I guess, who is a Mexican drug lord. Somebody feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't wanted to spend too much time learning about the show. But this was the most compelling scene to me, was where he's having this deep conversation with his brother. It sounds like his brother has been a very successful attorney, whereas the guy who later, I guess he goes by the name Saul Goodman, he was not as successful, and the brother's putting him down and saying he went to some terrible, lousy law school in Samoa or someplace. So he's feeling all down and beaten down by his own brother, not even giving him any respect. So I do feel sorry for the character in this moment. That was the only moment that I really felt like, oh, this is sort of interesting, because as I've mentioned in some of my other videos, there really is that hierarchy in the legal profession where, if you don't graduate from a very top law school, or you're not at the top of your class, didn't make it to big law, then you're kind of relegated to, the dregs of the profession, where it's not really that glamorous, where you have to deal with a lot of down and out clients. You're struggling to make a buck, and sort of like this guy Saul, who is scrappy, and he is not living the glamorous high powered life of being a corporate lawyer making $200,000 to $800,000 a year. So that's what I find a little bit interesting there. And let me try to revert back there. So that was the episode of Better Call Saul. And another reason that kind of ties into today's topic. Another reason why I don't feel compelled to spend my life watching this kind of legal show is that, there are just so many legal shows that have been out there, and you very rarely see any sort of like ethnic or racial diversity among the legal profession in those kind of shows. Like Ally McBeal was very popular when I was in law school. And then before that, there was LA Law, but I was a little bit too young to be watching LA Law, but I know a lot of people really got into that. So many of these like depictions, like movies and stuff, there's not much diversity shown. And so looking at the statistics, I did do a little bit of research. If you Google like Asian American lawyers or what percentage of lawyers are Asian or Asian American, turns out that Asian Americans are underrepresented in the legal profession. So we make up roughly, I think, 5.7% of the US population, but only about 4.5% of the attorneys nationwide. And the disparity is a lot greater for African Americans. I didn't look up the statistics for Latinos, but I'm sure it is also pretty dire. For African Americans only make up about 5% of the legal profession, while making up somewhere like 15 to 18% of the whole US population. So there is that lack of diversity there. And things have definitely gotten better in the last 20, 25 years. From what I've seen where I practice in North Carolina, there is a significant African American population here. I do see a lot of African American attorneys and judges, and there's an active bar association for the local African American attorneys. They're pretty active, and I have a good friend who was president of the organization locally, which is called the Capital Lawyers Association. I've also been very active with the minorities in the profession group. And for a while there, I was actually going to the Triangle area Latino attorneys luncheons because a good friend of mine started that organization about 5 years ago. And since I wasn't able to really start up any sort of Asian Pacific American Bar Association here in North Carolina, I just kind of gravitated towards other areas, like hanging out with the Latino attorneys, the Hispanic Latino division, and, just meeting other people gradually, people who are like-minded and open-minded. They didn't have to be like people of color, but, found my own cool group of other attorney peers that I felt comfortable with, regardless of what their race or ethnicity was. So, thanks guys for being here. It's nice for people to show up. I know it's Friday night. You guys got better things to do, right? So thank you so much for being here. Eunice's channel is so wonderful. She reached over 1,000 subscribers. And same for Audrey. She has a great channel also about her life as a college student, and just a lot of vlogging, talking about books and inspirational things and fashion. So let's see. Yeah, exactly. I wasn't really sure about that because when I was I had a very skewed idea of diversity for a while because I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad, which at that time was probably about 28% Asian. But now it's probably well over 50%. So, it was definitely weird going back to the East Coast, which is where I grew up, and then being in DC and feeling sort of like a minority again. But at law school at Georgetown, I would say back when I went, the school was still maybe about 12% Asian American. And there was a very active Asian Pacific American Bar Association in DC. So I met a lot of really great people through that organization. I got a mentor. I went to a lot of their programs and their networking events and dinners and, just like mock interviews. They had so many programs. So I didn't really feel like a big minority in DC either, even though it was definitely different from being in California for 5 years. So coming into DC then, it still felt like, okay, I feel comfortable here. I had a lot of friends. I was active in different community organizations. So it really wasn't until I moved to North Carolina that I really felt like a minority again. It was like growing up in Georgia all over again, at least in terms of the legal profession, because really there are so few Asian American attorneys in North Carolina. I could probably name you all of them, and that would be like fewer than 20 people in the whole entire state. And then some of them would sort of join up with our fledgling Asian Pacific American Bar Association, like 15 plus years ago, but then they'd wind up moving away to another state. So, the numbers just kept going up and down. And unfortunately, I have met a significant number of Asian American recent law graduates who couldn't even find jobs. So, they're not even working as attorneys anymore. So it is pretty tough. I do feel like there has been some feelings of discrimination myself personally, and I'll be glad to share some of my stories. I jotted down some notes here so I can try to keep track of things. So the first thing that I'd like to mention is that the North Carolina Bar Association, which is a statewide voluntary bar association, did surprisingly come out with a statement about the racist history of the Bar Association and how they used to discriminate against people who are not allowed to be part of the Bar Association decades ago. So I'll share that real fast. This was something that just came in through my email. It was sent out to all the members of the State Bar Association. And it says a report has been completed by the North Carolina Bar Association identifying relationships between the NCBA and systemic racism in North Carolina. The report can be accessed through this link. So anyone that really wants to see it, their website is like ncbar.org. The report is a result of research that began in relation to a North Carolina Bar Foundation Justice Fund that honors Governor Charles B. Aycock. The research followed the issuance of a report in July 2020 by the Commission on History, Race, and a Way Forward at UNC Chapel Hill. Okay, so this email kind of goes forward talking about the history of the North Carolina Bar Association, which I didn't even know a lot of these facts either. It's like an organization that pretty much everybody joins, even though it's voluntary, because you get big discounts on the continuing legal education classes, and you get access to really helpful listservs. So I'm on the family law listserv, as well as the labor and employment law listserv, which isn't as active, but it's also helpful. So pretty much anybody that is actively practicing law would want to be part of this. So it was organized back in 1899 at a meeting in the Supreme Court of North Carolina. So, of course, back then, I'm sure there were no women and no people of color involved in the Bar Association. So they had this language limiting membership to, quote, any white person from the NCBA Constitution, or that's the language that they had. But then they removed that language. And then you kind of scroll down and it talks about how they denied membership to an African-American man, Eric Michaud, who was a Duke Law School graduate. So they wouldn't let him become a member. So the Duke University Law School severed its ties with the NCBA on December 12th, 1966. Following April Julius Chambers, who is a very well-known civil rights attorney who has passed away, and Henry Fry were the first Black attorneys admitted to the membership in the NCBA, while other Black attorneys were rejected for membership. Eric Michaud was admitted to membership in 1969. So anyway, ultimately, it took until just about a month ago, a little over a month ago, that the Board of Governors of the Bar Association finally issued this statement acknowledging the racism, and it says issues a full and complete apology to all individuals, known and unknown, who were denied admission to the association on the basis of race, the results of which have harmed generations of Black attorneys in North Carolina. And so it says, it just kind of goes on about acknowledging the racist policies that they used to have to keep out specifically like African Americans or non-white people from being part of the bar. So, this is all great. I mean, I do notice that the different bar associations that I've been involved in, be it the North Carolina Bar Association or the North Carolina Advocates for Justice, they all try to make more of an effort these days to try to include people of all backgrounds. And in fact, probably like several years ago, there was I think the incoming president of the Wake County Bar Association personally called me and asked me if I would be willing to serve on some committees and stuff. I was like, okay, well, I'm really flattered. But at that point, I was just so overwhelmed with work, and I was already involved in different organizations. So I had to say no. But eventually I would like to, get involved with the minorities in the profession group again, and, do some more mentoring and just take part in things. Like they recently had a diversity conference virtually. This is something that they typically do every year that's sponsored by the North Carolina Bar Association, and you get a lot of continuing legal ed credits for it. And so my good friend, Tawanda Foster Artis, who I've known since she was a law student at UNC, she was one of the organizers, but I couldn't attend that. There's so many activities going on now. So I really think it's great that, people are talking about racism in the legal profession, or how we can address things. How do we increase diversity? That it's not cool to be racist or exclusive, or you might have actions or policies that might not specifically be racist on their faces or sexist, but the ultimate result is that, it does affect different populations differently. So Dr. Sev, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Sev's financial channel is really great. We appreciate you being here. Happy New Year. And thank you for being here also. RK Channel 2, Tyler is here. Hey, thank you. Thank you for being here. I started watching that interview of you on YouTube, but didn't have time to watch the whole thing because it's pretty long, but I'll watch it later. So that's cool. Tyler was recently interviewed by someone named Arnold Ho on his YouTube channel. Hey, Brian, thank you for being here. Brian also has a really good channel. He's a pharmacist who also covers other relationship issues and stuff on his channel. So so I'd like to switch over to this racism in the law article that was very compelling. And to me, it was very interesting because it's written by a young African-American lawyer or attorney, now a district court judge in Wake County. So I've appeared before her a few times, and it's always good to get more insider information about the judges and what kind of experiences they've gone through. And I just kind of assumed that since she's a little bit younger, that maybe she didn't experience racism or sexism as much, but clearly, we still have a lot of problems here in North Carolina and even within the judicial bar. It was sad to hear these quotes in her bar journal article, these like firsthand accounts of things that happened to different African-American attorneys and judges. So her article, which was put out in August, a few months ago, in the Wake County Bar Association newsletter. It's called Justice Isn't Always Blind. Racism is a Prevalent Issue in Our Court System, Even as a Lawyer, by Judge Ashley P. Dunstan. So she's saying that, talking about systemic racism, which not only affects Black people involved as parties in the criminal justice system in obtaining housing, education, healthcare, and employment opportunities, but it is pervasive within our legal profession as a whole. So many times we as attorneys pretend that we're immune to instances of racism because of our education, background, or experiences. Some of us even go so far as to say that we don't, quote, see color. However, to not see color is as much of a farce as it is to say that racism isn't a thing that we should be concerned about because it hasn't affected us directly. This form of micro-invalidation is hurtful and suppresses the experiences of our Black colleagues, such as these. So these have been like edited. So the first quote, which is not attributed to a specific person. It says, as a rookie prosecutor in the late 1970s, I quickly learned how to deal with one of the most racist judges I would ever encounter. Not only would this judge slap his .45 caliber handgun down on the bench, but once he even hung a hangman's noose in front of the bench during a murder trial. It didn't take long for me to notice a pattern when I had to appear before him. If I were prosecuting a white person, he would either find a way to dismiss the charge, continue the case, or find an excuse to not impanel a jury for trial. Most of the time, he wouldn't even look in my direction unless he just absolutely couldn't help it. Okay, so that's really appalling. I mean, it took place in the late 1970s. I can totally understand, the frustration, because back in the late 70s, there really were very few non-white, non-male attorneys out there. So then another attorney says, or judge, I had only been at the district attorney's office for a month when a defense attorney came into the courtroom telling me that another ADA had made a deal on a previous court date. I informed him that I didn't feel comfortable dismissing the case because I was new, but that he could take the file to another courtroom and ask that ADA to dismiss it. As he was leaving out of the side door, he called me an effing N-word. I confronted him and told him that I heard what he said. Wow, that's terrible. I mean, for an attorney to say that to somebody that's working for the district attorney's office, that is really offensive. And I can't believe that anybody thought that he could get away with that. I knew that I couldn't do anything because I would be fired for reacting, so I had to swallow my pride and continue to handle my docket. I've continued to have to work with this individual who has yet to apologize. Wow, that is horrible. So it sounds like this didn't happen too long ago, but that is totally appalling. And it kind of reminds me of a friend, the African-American friend of mine who did work for the district attorney's office somewhere in North Carolina for a number of years. And she did feel like, it was very stressful for her as a Black woman, who looked a little younger, and people would push her around, and nobody actually called her the N-word, but people were disrespectful towards her in some of the more rural areas. And then there was some white woman that even blatantly said that she was mad that that her son or somebody had taken up with, quote, a colored woman, and the person said this directly to my friend who, she was pretty appalled that the lady would just flat out own up to her racism in front of her. So yeah, it must be really tough. Yeah. I mean, that's why, in a way, I don't think I could have lasted working for a district attorney's office or public defender's office, because you have to deal with so many people. And a lot of times those types of people are uneducated, more likely to be racist or offensive. Yeah. So let me see. Let me get back over here in case people have any comments here. Okay. Thank you. All right. So another person says, a white female judge would routinely ask my white male colleagues in open court during a hearing whether I was right on the law regarding legal arguments I made. She never asked me whether my white male colleagues were correct on the law. It was just presumed they were correct. In my worst hearing with this judge, my white colleague agreed that I was right on the law, and she still refused to believe me. When she refused to allow my clients to speak, which was their constitutional right, I withdrew. She appointed the white attorney, and he represented the clients at the hearing the next week when I had secured leave. Okay, so that's really offensive too. I can't believe like a white female judge who has probably been discriminated against herself, would treat some African-American attorney in this way. Yeah, so I mean, I've definitely felt some of this happen to me with some clients who just really felt like, doubting my opinion or doubting my experience. Whereas I feel like if I had been some like older looking white male attorney, they probably would have listened to me and shut up, instead of arguing with me. So, it's always just kind of like a feeling that you get when people just sort of disrespect you or question your ability, or just don't even want to take your advice, that kind of dismissive attitude. So, let's see. So I'll just kind of scroll down a little bit here. This article is available. I think you would just like Google the Wake County Bar Association and racism in the law, and you should be able to find this PDF. So, yeah, I remember there was also like a judge. I can't remember if it's in this article. There was a judge who had previously worked for a district attorney's office, and he had gone down to some county that's like near the beach where it's not very diverse. So he had to go there for a district attorney's conference. So he really enjoyed himself at the conference and everything. But then lo and behold, after the conference event, he had to walk back to his hotel by himself. So he got pulled over or stopped by a police officer who drove by and saw him walking down the street. And the police officer detained him for a while and was grilling him, as to who he was and what's he doing, where's he going, and there he is, he works on behalf of the government, working for the district attorney's office, but yet he was disrespected by a police officer and grilled like he was a criminal. And I think, like, I can't even remember exactly what, but something in my mind tells me that he was also like handcuffed for a while and had to sit there while the guy was like running a check on him. So it's pretty humiliating. So let's see. Yeah, there's just so many stories. Yeah, it's just kind of sad. As an attorney, I've been stopped at the bar and been told by bailiffs that only lawyers and court personnel can come any further. Although I've complained, nothing has been done about my treatment or likely the treatment of other lawyers who look like me. Okay, so that hasn't actually happened to me before, but I have felt times, especially when I was younger, that people just assumed that I was not an attorney or would even question me if I was an attorney. And the funny thing is that, like, the first thing that come to mind, it happened to me with Black people. Like, there was one time I was working at a firm and one of the partners told me, hey, this lady who had come in regarding some traffic ticket or whatever also had a civil problem. So could I come out and talk with her? So I went out to the waiting room and introduced myself. The first thing she says to me is, you the attorney? And I was like, yes, I am. So, I talked to her and stuff, but clearly she had probably never talked to any like Asian looking person before, probably like had only lived in North Carolina, never gone anywhere else, and probably had never run into any Asian American attorney or something. So there was also another time that I was on a phone conference with some other attorneys. We were all part of like a young lawyers division committee. And the guy who was like this African-American young guy who might have been the head of our committee, just flat out asked me if I were a paralegal or an attorney. And I was like, I'm an attorney, So it's just, little things like that. You go to the clerk's office and somebody working at the clerk's office is just kind of, talks down to you or rude and stuff. And so sometimes, I wonder, is it because I'm Asian or is it because, they're just rude and nasty to everybody? It's hard to tell. So, yeah, this was a very good article. And then soon after all of the George Floyd, all of the shootings of Black people this past year, a lot of the African-American attorneys and their allies, went out to peacefully demonstrate and give speeches in front of the Wake County Courthouse. And I remember Judge Dunstan also said she did feel even offended when she was part of this rally, that there was some white woman that made some offensive comment to her or in front of her saying like, who's that girl or whatever. And, I'm like, gosh, that's a judge, you just refer her as some colored girl or something that was offensive to her too. So even when they're trying to rally for, equal rights and, to show people that, yes, we do have diversity in our profession and we care about, eradicating racism and stuff, she herself still got put down by some racist Yahoo, who just referred to her as some colored girl or colored lady or something like that. So yeah, this is some of the attorneys in front of the Wake County Courthouse. And it ends, sort of with a hopeful message where Judge Dunstan says, however, there is hope, much like the preventative actions that we take daily to curb the spread of COVID-19. We must do the same to eradicate racial disparities. It's extremely important that we begin to understand that the legal profession is not immune to instances of racism, neither explicit nor implicit. And it's time to educate ourselves so that we can all exemplify the highest level of professionalism and competency. We must take an inner look at ourselves and our beliefs, then outwardly work to facilitate those changes. We must educate ourselves on the plight of others. Correct colleagues who say improper things and act inappropriately, check our implicit biases, and be willing to have difficult and uncomfortable conversations. Additionally, we can work on tangible things to prevent further instances of this behavior in our bar. One way is to advocate for a mandatory bias/diversity/inclusion CLE requirement to be conducted on a semi-annual basis. Another way is to advocate for our state bar to adopt ABA Model Rule 8.4G that renders it misconduct for an attorney to, engage in conduct that is harassment or discrimination. Okay, So yeah, I think it was great that a judge, locally, a district court judge here in Wake County, did write this lengthy article. And it is pretty sad when you read about all these firsthand accounts of what kind of racist actions our fellow attorneys and even judges have faced during their legal careers. Some of these stories sound like, it probably just happened within the last 5 to 10 years, not anything that happened in the 70s or the 80s or something. So anyway, I just thought it would be good to bring attention to these issues. And I will turn this off. Let's see. So Dr. Sev says, so disgusting. Some cities and counties are worse than others. I just can't imagine going through this. I would probably get disbarred. I know it is frustrating. Yeah. And that's why, ultimately, people want to move to places where they can feel comfortable and feel like a regular person. So that's why, I really did not enjoy moving to North Carolina at first, because it was so different from the places that I had lived before. And it just kind of reminded me of reverting back to when I was a kid growing up in Georgia, feeling like a minority again. And it still sort of feels like that too, because like I remember a little over 10 years ago, I had to drive down to Whiteville, North Carolina. That's nowhere that anybody goes. It's kind of in the southeastern part of North Carolina. And I had to go to the Bladen County Courthouse to argue a motion to dismiss. And, I go there and it was so weird. It seemed like I had stepped back into 1950 something or 1960s. Of course, there were no Asian people to be found. There were a lot of like white and black people, and they all looked kind of like poor and downtrodden and stuff. And the courthouse looked really old and run down and old timey. So I was like expecting to see like, colored water fountains or something. It was just really bizarre, like having to go to this place and then argue a motion. And of course, I lost a motion, and I also got a traffic ticket on the way there. But that was the only time I ever had to go down to Bladen County. I mostly stay in Wake County and Durham County, right around where my office is. And I do feel more comfortable there because, we do have more cosmopolitan people. We have a little bit more diversity, even though there are plenty of times when I go to the courthouses and there are no other Asian people there, so it does seem kind of weird. So, for that matter, I do feel like, this is why people want to work or live in neighborhoods or go to places where they don't have to feel like a minority or feel threatened even, like if you're worried for your physical safety even. So Dr. Sev says she was probably only used to white people being attorneys. Yeah. Conditioning a number of older black people treat young black lawyers the same, conditioned to think only whites are good lawyers. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I've definitely heard about that too. So, yeah, I remember there was one time I had a very difficult child custody case, which was a complete mess. And I was getting really sick and tired of the case. So I had this friend who's a white male attorney who actually has less experience than I do. He went to much lower ranked schools, but we were friends because we knew each other from coaching a mock trial team together. So I knew he needed the business because he had just, he had his own law practice also. So I decided, well, look, I don't really have time to pay attention to your case. So, why don't you let this guy, let's call him Joe, my friend Joe, the white male attorney, why don't you let him take over your case? And I had already talked with the client and his dad, who was very constantly interfering with the case and always had to have his say and always arguing and doubting me and stuff. So I had already had a conversation with them as to what our game plan was for the case. But we had a meeting along with my white male attorney friend, Joe. And Joe basically said the same thing that I had already told the client and his father we were going to do. And so the client's dad, this old white man from South Carolina, was like, wow, well, now I feel really good because now I feel like we do have a game plan. And I'm like, what the heck? I had already been telling you the same effing thing, excuse my language, but I was really pissed off inside, even though I tried hard not to show it. But, it's like I'm telling you something and you don't believe me, or you just totally brush it aside and give me no credibility until this white male attorney friend of mine tells you the same exact thing. And then finally you're like happy and you think that, oh, there's going to be a game plan for your son's case. Give me a break. Yeah, it was ridiculous. And then this is the same person who threatened to report me to the state bar. And then later, about a year or so later, he tried to like reach out to me through LinkedIn and wanted to like be friends on LinkedIn. I'm like, excuse me, no way, just get out of my life, these people, So yeah, I mean, sometimes it is weird, like people hire me, but then I see their implicit biases or their racism or whatever come out. And, it's just a bad feeling, like who wants to practice like that or have to run a business and you have to cater to people like that. So anyway, perhaps I'm getting a little too ticked off here, but that was years ago. It still makes me annoyed to think of it. Okay, Tyler says there's still so much to fix in this country. People of color can be highly successful and respected, but we're still looked down upon. Yeah, I mean, because it's sad. I always thought that, as people get older, the next generation will be better educated, and we see so much more diversity out there on TV, or, people look up to different idols that might be, of different races. And, like you think that there's greater acceptance and less racism as people get older, but then you still hear about some of these hate crimes and things that happen, and they're all being committed by people under the age of 30, say. And you're like, wow, where they learned this from? I guess, these kinds of behaviors can't be constantly stamped out, because they still, learn them from their families or something. So Eunice says it's always shocking to hear that these cases are still happening today. Yeah, exactly. It is very sad. And for that reason, I think definitely it is good to have more diversity in the profession and stuff. But on the other hand, I do always want to caution people that, look, going to law school may not be like the greatest solution, if we all flood the law schools and stuff, because, the cautionary tale is that a lot of times people go to law school, they run up tons and tons of debt, and they still can't find a job. So that's another tough thing. Let me see. Thanks for surfacing these issues. I got to run to give my roommate a haircut. Okay, thank you. Thanks for being here, Eunice. So, yeah, on that note, what was I going to mention about, job discrimination? So let's say, everybody that wants to change society decides to go to law school, but the problem is that there aren't enough jobs to go around anyway. And who's in charge of doling out the jobs? It is changing slowly, though. Things are slowly getting better, but there have been times, especially when I was desperately trying to find jobs, when I moved from DC to North Carolina. Of course, I did wonder, the fact that I have a strange last name, a last name that is clearly foreign, that people can't pronounce, that people immediately know that, okay, I am not a white person when I apply for jobs. I just felt like there were so many times I applied for jobs where I felt for sure I'm qualified. I have X number of years of workers' comp experience, or I have X number of years of civil experience, and I just wouldn't even be able to get an interview. So there's so many examples. Like, for example, there's this one firm that has one, I would say, light-skinned African-American partner who is, in the past, he would go to all these like diversity conferences and talk at these like bar association things, about diversity and stuff, even though he was like the only diversity in the whole law firm. So I applied to his firm for a job that I felt very qualified for, and heard nothing. It was just like crickets. It's like, okay, no, not even a call for an interview. Okay. But then again, on the other hand, I do realize that the job market is or was so saturated that, they could put out a job ad and get like 200 applications for one job position. But it's like, why didn't I even get an interview? So, there was another situation where I was desperately trying to leave one of the law firms that I was working at, and a friend of mine who is mixed race, she's like Asian and white, she told me about it. This job was not posted, but her neighbor worked as an attorney for this big firm, a very well-known firm that would have paid a lot more than what my previous job had paid me. And so I knew there was a job because my friend told me that she wasn't interested in it because she had a young child at the time. So she asked me if I was interested in applying for it. And I was like, sure, yeah, I would love to work for that firm. It's like a big name firm in the area. It would have been a huge pay raise for me. And I felt like I was qualified because I had been out of law school a little longer than she had. She had gone to Duke for law school and then like a regular state school for undergrad. And so I talked with her neighbor, the guy, Caucasian guy that worked at that firm, and he seemed kind of excited, like, yeah, give me your resume and I'll turn it in for you and stuff. And then after that, I heard absolutely nothing from the firm, not even like, not even an interview. And so I felt really really bummed out about that, because sometimes I would wonder, okay, is it because my name sounds foreign? Or is it because, it says UC Berkeley, I was an ethnic studies major, and this is probably a more conservative politically law firm. So maybe they don't want any ethnic studies rabble rousers working there or something. But I was really offended and disgusted, because soon after I applied for that job and heard nothing, I was at one of those like women attorneys lunches where they were talking about diversity and stuff. And I'm sitting there at a table at this dinner or lunch or whatever with a bunch of women from that firm that were supposed to be on the diversity committee. And there I am. Okay. It's like you have this diversity committee, but everybody is Caucasian. And, most of the people I sat right with, they weren't even attorneys, though. They were like the legal assistants or something. But I just thought it was just funny and kind of phony that this big firm that, tries to say that they're diverse and they have a diversity and inclusion committee and stuff. Here I am like sitting with them at some like luncheon or dinner type of celebratory event from a women attorneys group, and they didn't even bother to give me an interview. So I'm like, what gives? They have these attorneys that graduate from like fourth tier law schools, but granted, they're usually the people that graduated at the top of the fourth tier law school, but I just couldn't get jobs. And it was frustrating. I also found out that I was being paid $1,000 less starting salary compared to a white male person that had my job at one of the firms I worked for. So I was really mad about that. But then when I finally brought it up with the partners at the firm, they said, well, that guy made it sound like he had been making well over six figures at his previous job, and he had negotiated his salary. So, of course, they didn't bump up my salary anyway, but, an extra $1,000 over time, that adds up, and this was $1,000 from a long time ago. So maybe that's the equivalent of like $1,500 today, but it was just kind of offensive. Turned out that guy was not even a licensed attorney. He had lied to them. He said he was an associate at this firm in another state, but he actually had no active bar license. And last I checked, when I Googled him, he still was not an active licensed attorney anywhere. So I guess he failed the bar exams or something. So yeah, those are some examples there. Let's see. Oh, okay. I especially hate when I give a great idea in a meeting and a white person takes my idea. Seems like yeah, exactly. So a friend of mine who is an African-American attorney has talked to me about that too, where she's felt that there's this older white male attorney that works along with her, and she worked so hard on some project or did all this research, but then, he acts like he came up with it himself. And then everybody is like patting him on the back and thinking he's a hero or whatever. Yeah. So those are the kinds of like backwards, backhanded. It's not overt racism, but it definitely does affect you. And, like people need to realize that they can't be acting like that. I don't know how to change people's behaviors, but yeah, I mean, it is definitely frustrating. So Dr. Sev also says, studies have shown that our names can cause it. Yes, exactly. Yeah, there are definitely all those studies about, so-called, Black people's names, those resumes get tossed and they don't even get a call for an interview. Whereas if you have some white sounding name, like Kristen, Jessica, then you might get an interview or a call or something because they just assume that you're a white person. Oh, and speaking of that, yeah, I have this really nice white Caucasian attorney friend who has a slightly unusual name, So one time there was some older lady who had called her law firm and then was told that this person was going to be working on her case. So the older client, just immediately said, "Is she Black?" And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person like even said that. The client actually asked the legal assistant or the secretary on the phone if the attorney was some Black person just because she had a slightly unusual name. So yeah, I'm sure she was very, I don't know, happy to find out that my friend is actually white, but it's just like there's all these like ingrained like racist attitudes that continue to persist, not even just within the profession, but among the clientele that we have to serve. So Dr. Sev says more common than you know about diversity makeup of the supposed diversity board. Yeah, like sometimes it's just lip service. Like they don't really pay attention to you, or they aren't really like affecting change or anything. Like they might have their one token light-skinned Black person that works there, and handles all the Black people's cases as a defense attorney. Yeah, and unfortunately that's what I see. So I mean, what can I do about it? Oh, well, let me just throw in one more example while I'm just mentioning this anyway, because I don't want to seem like a complete whiner or something, but this is definitely like an issue that is like a hot button issue with me since I've lived through it. And I was an ethnic studies major in college, and I really feel like we need to make things fair. We need to give people more chances. We need to increase the inclusion of our profession. So there was like one time, the first racist thing that happened to me when I moved here to North Carolina was that I was eating lunch at the Berkeley Cafe in downtown Raleigh with the other attorneys at my firm. And then some slightly older white man, he wasn't even that old. He was probably like, I don't know, like he looked like he's around 60-ish or something. He like comes walking up to us, and he knew the partners at my firm. So he was just like, hey, and then he saw me, and the partners introduced me to him. And the first thing that older attorney said was, so what are you? And I was like, well, my parents are from Taiwan, but I grew up in Georgia. So he goes, good, just as long as you're not Japanese. And I was like, what the heck? What does that have to do with me? First of all, you're racist against people that are of Japanese ancestry, because you can't get over World War II. I mean, what year was that? That was probably like around, I don't know, 2002 or something. How long had it been since the bombing of Pearl Harbor? And what do I have to do with it? What a total jackass. Yeah. So that guy's probably dead by now anyway. But, after that happened, a guy ended up walking away soon after that. And the partners apologized to me. I mean, they were pretty cool people. These are the same people that paid me less than the white male associate, but, they called themselves liberals, and, they're in general, they were decent to me and stuff. So that was one racist incident. Just other incidents or just like slights, where you wonder if people are really going to really treating you because of the way you look, or they perceive me as, being somebody they can bully around or something. So there was one time about 5 years ago, I went to small claims court, with my client, and I go walking into the courtroom, and this younger white male attorney, he opened the door. So I walked through, because I figured, oh, okay, he's opening the door for me. And then as I walked through, he goes, excuse you. And I'm like, excuse me, you piece of shit, I mean, he probably went to some crap law school, and here he is, trying to like exert his like dominance over me, just because I'm walking into the courtroom. What a total piece of whatever. Yeah. So now I can't even remember the guy's name. I thought I had remembered his name, but I Googled him and I was like, nah, that's not his picture. Who knows? Maybe he's no longer practicing law or something. So, another thing that happened to me, actually, the strange thing is that in my mind, the most racist thing that ever happened to me as an attorney happened to me due to having a friendship with a Chinese American woman. So this woman, I met her through the Asian American professional group a long time ago when I first moved to North Carolina. And she was friends with my cousin, like they all hung out and stuff. So I met her too. And I actually hosted her baby shower. And she and her husband like came over for New Year's Eve dinner and stuff. But then once I started my own practice, she started having legal problems. So this is what I really, it kind of gets my goat, is that since I'm self-employed, a lot of times people just feel like they can call me up or email me anytime they have a legal problem, and I'm going to help them for free, no consultation fee, no nothing. So she continued calling and calling me about a problem regarding, I don't know, like maybe like somebody like doing bad work on her parents' home or something. And I'm giving her advice, did not charge her, even though back then I certainly was charging for consultations. And then finally, the third time that she called me, was when she said she had been talking to her husband, and her husband wanted to know, does Judy have any American lawyers that she works with that could handle our case? And so, I was very offended by that. I'm like, what does that mean to be an American lawyer? I was born here in the Midwest. I grew up in Georgia. I have never lived in Asia before. Granted, my parents moved back to Taiwan, but that was after I went off to college. So to be seen as a perpetual foreigner, even by other fellow Chinese Americans, then again, she and her husband immigrated from China when they were probably like teenagers or something. So I was really disgusted. I was like, fine, you don't want to hire me. You'd rather give money to somebody who looks American, because you think that you need to get some sort of, loud, aggressive, older, big white guy, to be your attorney. Fine, just go pound sand or whatever. Don't bother me again. So, being very polite and stuff, I just was like, okay, fine. So I did not call her back again, but I emailed her and I said, well, here's this, white male friend of mine who has his own practice in Durham. He does civil litigation. You can feel free to contact him if you want to. Goodbye. And I never heard from her again. So after that, I was really mad. So I did gripe about it to my cousin who had known her and her husband longer than I had. And my cousin was just like, well, you have to understand she's a fob. So fob means fresh off the boat. So that's kind of like a slang term. I don't think people use it as much anymore because usually immigrants don't come on boats anymore. But so my cousin was like, yeah, she's just a fob. Okay. She doesn't understand. Like it was supposed to mean like somebody that just is kind of tacky and crude from mainland China that doesn't understand American societal norms or how to be politically correct or something. So lo and behold, like probably over 5 years ago, I was walking through the mall and I ran into this person again, and she was there with her kids. And, I was polite and stuff. I think I do a good job of acting phony and just to brush things over and stuff. So it was like, hey, hi, never heard from her again, which is totally fine because I don't want to be known as that person that everybody can just like bombard with all their legal problems. And hey, Judy, I got this problem. Oh, I got in a car accident. Oh, I got it. Oh, I'm having marital difficulty. Oh, I might need to get divorced. Oh, I mean, especially when people are going to be disrespectful like that and say, I need an American attorney, I'm willing to pay this American attorney, $300 an hour, but for you, you need to just talk to me for free because you're not worth any money, So that was very offensive to me, and it still gets my goat just kind of retelling the story anyway. But I haven't told that story in years and years. It's still a prominent problem in the film media industry. Only within the past 3-ish years that highly diverse films were considered profitable. Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of times it's all about the money too. So, they feel like, well, nobody's going to watch a show or nobody's going to watch a movie, with this Asian person as a protagonist, or let's whitewash it or make the protagonist a white person, Yeah, I mean, the media is totally different from the legal profession. I think it's even more hard to induce change. Then he'll say it was only a joke. Yeah, exactly. I think, are you referring to the thing about, as long as you're not Japanese? Yeah. Okay. So Michi, welcome. Thank you for joining in. My classmate who was Black was top of the class in law school, got his LLM in taxation at Georgetown. Hey, that's where I went, but was told by the hiring partner he wasn't sure when he would be hiring someone for the job. Oh, that's terrible. Yeah. So I wonder, like, I guess your friend felt like the guy was lying to him, lying that there really wasn't a job available or something. That's just terrible. Yeah. But, you also see this really with women in general, too, where the hiring partners, usually they're male, and they're just going to assume that the women are going to, get married and get pregnant and have kids and quit or something, which is, again, a stereotype. So, but definitely it does sting when that there is a job out there, but yet, they just brush you over and act like, you're not qualified, or, we're going to hire somebody. Yeah, it's just terrible. And so, I mean, the only way you can really combat it is to try to, seek out allies, make your own connections and try to schmooze. And unfortunately, you just kind of have to keep it under wraps without looking like the angry radical Black person, or the angry Asian person, or, the loud and angry, Latino person, you kind of have to squelch it and be like, hey, I'm a team player. I love this firm. I love working here. And, I'm not going to be a rabble rouser and stuff, because there definitely have been a couple of things in the news within the last 10 years where some African-American young women sued their law firms, claiming that they were victims of racism working for these big firms. I think they were both in New York City or something. And I'm not even sure what happened with their lawsuits, because even reading the news articles, I knew that there were too many like holes in the case where the law firms could just say, oh, look, this happens to everybody. A lot of people quit. There's no guaranteed job security, even if you make it into big law, that, even plenty of the white male attorneys are have to work long hours and feel like they're mistreated. Everybody gets mistreated as a big law associate, coming in right out of law school, or just complaining that you didn't get enough mentorship or whatever. So it's just really hard to be able to prove anything, and I know, because I practice employment law, it's really hard to have a good case. So even though they called him for an interview, 2 weeks later, he hired a white woman. Well, ain't that surprising? Yeah, because there was this one time, the last job I applied for before I started my own practice, this was a job where the guy said they had already received well over 120 resumes for one position with this small to mid-sized firm that would have paid me a lot more money than my previous firm. And so I did get the interview, and then the partner later told me they decided to hire somebody that had more experience. But then later on, I did happen to look at their website again, and I saw who they hired. And it was this, pretty blonde, tall, pretty looking white woman who had less experience than I did. Like she had just graduated from some no-name law school, had maybe 1 or 2 years of experience, when back then I think I had about 5 to 6 years of experience. But he decided to hire this person, and she's still an attorney working for that firm to this day. So, on the other hand, I can't 100% blame that on racism, because at least he did give me an interview, which I thought went okay. But I really do feel like I probably was so miserable at my old firm that I spent too much time saying negative things about my then current employer, which is always a bad thing. Like, you shouldn't say that. Whenever you interview for a job, just act like everything's peachy keen, and don't trash talk your current or past employers. Don't be too honest about why you want to leave there. So, yeah, I mean, I can see that happening. It's just frustrating, and you can't really prove anything. I looked at the firm and was hesitant to apply myself because I noticed there weren't any people of color at this firm, and it made me uncomfortable. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, why not still apply? Who knows? I mean, like I said, there are plenty of firms out there that they sort of want to hire like a token minority, or who knows? I mean, don't just cancel yourself out of contention from the beginning. Yeah, but it is tough when you look at a lot of firms' website and then you see, oh, these are all old white men, like they don't even want to hire any women, or there are no Black people here, there are no Asian people, there are no Latinos. It is very uncomfortable, especially when you're in a state where it's not that diverse. So I feel like things really would have been different for my career had I stayed in the DC area or gone back to California, which is where I went to college, versus coming to North Carolina, where things are starting to get a little bit more diverse. And I do feel good, being out there, because I do feel like a lot of the clientele, they do gravitate towards me, like other Asian people or other people of color. Like they feel like I'm not going to be lying to them or talking down to them, that I'm more honest, or that, I'm not intimidating. So I can kind of own that and turn it around to help myself get clients, who are open-minded and don't mind having an Asian American female attorney. Yeah. So Tyler says Asian being prejudiced against each other is still pretty common. Yeah, exactly. Like these people, they just expect me to do all their stuff for free, or, just because, I'm Asian too, or, hey, we're Chinese or whatever, Yeah, I was very disgusted with the way that former friend, treated me, and how casually she just said her husband wanted to get an American attorney. Yeah. That's in just about every ethnic group. For some reason, most think white is right. Movies, news reports, etc., all push that narrative. Yeah, Exactly. So all we can do is try to be the best we can, try to take the high road and try to look for other supportive people, within our profession that can help us, and to do your networking and find people that are not prejudiced, to be your friends and help you with the whole networking referral of cases thing. Yeah. So, Simichi, are you an attorney actually? Yeah, I don't know if you feel like, okay, I decided to start my own estate planning firm. Oh, okay. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. If you want to tell us more about your firm or do some advertising for your firm in the chat box, feel free to. Yeah, I think that's really great. I only do a tiny bit of like simple estate planning, but it does seem like it would be more peaceful than being a divorce attorney or being a litigator and having to go to court and have all these deadlines and stuff. So that's really great to be able to start your own practice and then succeed at that. And then you don't have to worry about all the office politics and, potentially being discriminated against by your coworkers and stuff. Yeah. So I think that's the way to it, is oftentimes you just need to create your own business or be self-employed or find other like-minded people that you can work well with. Yeah. So let's see. So I just wanted to bring up these issues because I feel like, this whole past year, with the whole Black Lives Matter, where we see a lot of like really egregious, horrible, basically, murder by police, where the statistics just don't jive, where like African American defendants are more likely to have harsher sentences or to be sentenced to death, to be shot by the police or assaulted by the police. It's just really terrible. And then you do wonder, like, what can I do as an individual? What can I do? Like, obviously, if you have kids, you want to educate your kids so they don't turn out to be a bunch of, racist little bigoted people. So you can start with your own family, speak out against racism, get involved in different organizations and reach out to people. Yeah. So one thing that I did as an attorney, I was active with that Minorities in the Profession group, which is a subcommittee of the North Carolina Bar Association. So, there were no other Asian people in the committee, but we did have some events that were further out in the communities. Like we had some sort of presentation to middle school and high school students out towards Greensboro one time. So we had some African-American judges and attorneys talking to these kids and trying to motivate them and let them know about possibly going into the legal profession. So I spoke. I was one of the people asked to speak also. And I guess they thought it was so novel to have any sort of like Asian American attorney that afterwards there were a couple of like older Black ladies that came up to me and they were all thanking me for being there. And this lady was like, yeah, you're not like all the other Asian people. You actually talk to us. All you got to do is talk to us. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, maybe the only Asian people she had ever run into were like a Korean dry cleaner or some Chinese restaurant worker who couldn't even talk to her anyway because they didn't know English. So you want to be that bridge, and that's what sometimes I did find kind of stressful, because I felt like wherever I went, like people were staring at me or people were like, oh, who's that? That person doesn't belong here. Why is she in the courtroom? Yeah. It's just kind of like a weird feeling, to go places and you feel like people are staring at you, or like any mistake that you could make, they're going to be like, oh, she's a crappy attorney, so anyway, I do feel like, just going around to places, meeting people and showing people that, hey, I can speak proper English. Yes, I did grow up in the South too. I understand your culture. I feel like, in a way, as an individual, you too can also be the bridge where, just don't only socialize and don't only network with people from your own ethnicity or racial background or cultural background. Be willing to reach out to people and talk to each other and teach them about your culture or your history. Be willing to go to different like cultural events, like, Black History Month events and stuff. I go to those things too, watch different kinds of films, learn about history, just don't be in your own bubble, and encourage your friends to do that too. Like for MLK Day, a diverse group of myself and my friends, we would typically try to do something for MLK Day, whether attend some community event or a luncheon or a speech or community service, things like that. Yeah, because otherwise it's too easy for people to live in their own segregated little world and not really help promote this multiculturalism and understanding. So I was born in and grew up in Jamaica, so I tend to say whatever is on my mind, cause yeah, good for you. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good thing. And I find that as I'm getting older too, it's like sometimes you just don't care anymore. It's like, look, I'm going to call you out on it. And I don't care how people perceive me anymore. Like you just really don't care as much, or you're not as shy about your opinions, and you feel like, well, I'm older. I've lived through it all. I don't need to, curry favor with people. So I can be blunt. Yeah. So I had an Indian coworker tell me to tone it down. I was young and didn't care. I called out stuff. I'm older, but haven't changed too much. Still call out mess. Yeah. Well, we need people like that. Yeah. Sometimes people are just like too polite to really like say anything or raise a ruckus over things. Oh, oh, thank you. Yeah. So this is a good friend of mine from the DC area who has shown up. Thank you very much for being here. Hope you have a happy new year. And then this is Jeanette, who has a really nice channel with her daughter. They do a lot of really interesting like cooking videos and hiking videos. Thank you for making this video. We got that stare in the Midwest, but not California. Yeah, exactly. That's why living in California is just so unusual, because it did seem really novel to me when I first moved to California to go to college, to look around and see that, wow, I don't even feel like a minority anymore. So it was very, very unusual being there. Yeah. So you just have to seek out, your own community or your own group of friends, and hopefully find a way to feel at home wherever you wind up. That's how Spike Lee became a successful filmmaker. Huh. Okay, I guess that was a little while ago. Yeah, just like calling out people and stuff. Yeah, so he was pretty shocking. Yeah, I remember Spike Lee came and spoke at UC Berkeley when I was a college student there. Yeah, so it's really interesting, like watching his movies and the kind of dialogue that his movies ended up bringing out. So yeah, so if anybody else has any comments or anything you'd like to share about any racism that you felt in your own profession, or what we can do to try to improve the state of race relations in America, feel free to drop a comment there. And I guess that's pretty much it. I just like doing live streaming so much better. I just recently made another video about how much money I made as a lawyer. When I was working for small law firms. And it was frustrating because I kept messing up, and sometimes I'd have to keep looking down at my notes, to keep all the figures straight, because I was converting the dollars into 2021 dollars. And so then I'm like, oh, well, this doesn't look good, because when you make a YouTube video, you don't want to like keep looking down, and you have to look at the right spot on the camera and stuff. So it is nerve-wracking to make videos compared to live streaming, where I feel like I'm just talking and being a lot more natural and less stressed out and anxiety ridden. So what's that? Five Bloods was a good movie, but not necessarily my favorite compared to Do the Right. Okay, I didn't watch the Five Bloods, but I did watch Do the Right Thing a handful of times. But boy, that was a really long time ago. Yeah, I was looking for a copyright-free version of Fight the Power, but I couldn't find it on YouTube. So that's why I didn't play it. But boy, that movie was out so long ago. It's like become a classic. So it is very interesting, like how much has changed since that movie came out. It was probably like in like the early 90s. Yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah, that's an old movie now. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sev. Thank you for being here. Yeah, I know sometimes you want to cover some serious topics. Other times we can have a little bit more fun and goofiness and stuff. But I just felt like this is something important to talk about, given that 2020 was such a crazy year and just really bad, because you can't believe that there are still so many like horrible racist things that continue to happen in our country, and you just really want to think like, what can we all do as individuals, to try to change things. So I guess I'll wind things down now, unless anybody has any quick questions or comments and stuff. Hope you guys have a great weekend. I do plan to have another live stream, maybe on Sunday night, depending on my schedule and stuff, either Sunday night, or we'll wait until the following Sunday night. And I'll have a video out about the, what I made at a law firm, since so many people have been interested in my other video about how much do lawyers make. So I'll just continue that topic there. So have a great weekend, you guys. And thank you so much for being here. I'll see you guys next time.